Hello, folks. Welcome to today's broadcast. His Excellency Joseph Newman departs the country for the African Union Summit in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, at the AU headquarters, where he will be attending the 38th section of the African Union Summit. Heads of states have already gathered in Addis Ababa to grace this occasion. There are several issues that will be discussed by heads of state, and as they go to also appoint their new chairperson that will take over the AU for the next term. So today, His Excellency Joseph Newman is now departing the country to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where he's going to be attending the AU Summit. That's the 38th AU Summit. The AU Summit started since January, where other countries' representatives that are part of the African Union have gathered to discuss issues as it relates to the African Union and as it relates to its operation in all of these African countries. As it stands, their sole primary concern is how to create peace and stability within all African states, and also talk about trade and how they can carry on their trade smoothly in other African countries. So today, the president will be leaving the country to form part of the 38th Heads of States Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So here he has come and then being greeted by his officials as he departs the country for Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So the president will be meeting other heads of states in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and other heads of states have already gathered there. And tomorrow will be that heads of state sitting. It begins tomorrow, and at that sitting, they will be discussing issues surrounding African Union, and also high on their agenda and issues of discussion. They're going to be talking about those affected countries that are affected by crisis, especially the war. We talked about what is happening in Gaza. What is also talked about the G20 summit. Talked about that's South Africa G20 summit, and they're also going to be discussing pending issue as it relates to 2026 and how they're going to work tirelessly to see the progress of all African states in terms of uniting all African states and how they can smoothly run the affairs of all African states that are part of the African Union. So today, the president with his delegates are departing their country as him will be attending the 38th section in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So, like I said, African states that are part of this region, or African states that are part of the African Union, heads of states are already guided and go to Ethiopia, waiting for the section on tomorrow. These sessions started since January up to now. There were executive summit where members of all of these African countries that are part of the AU have gathered to discuss issues, and the high profile as the supreme of the AU is the heads of state. So the heads of states are the supreme of the AU, and today they're going to be departing to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where they will be sitting to have a discussion and finalize issues as it relates to African state. So, as we hear, we are awaiting the president as he leaves his resting room, and then he will come out to board his plane and then depart to Ethiopia. So he will be joined by some of his ministers The foreign ministers will be there too as well to represent the executive committee there in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So the president will be joining her in Addis Ababa. So there are a series of meetings that will be ongoing. There are several things that will be highlighted on that discussion. This is the 38th sitting, and for the head of state, 38th sitting, and the executive sitting having their 46th sitting, and after that 46th sitting, which is ongoing, will be the heads of state meeting, which is the supreme council on the African Union. So right after the heads of state meeting, where the chairperson of the union will be appointed, and the co-chairperson will also be appointed by these heads of state to run the affairs of the African Union. Key issues that will be discussed at the African Union Summit will be highlighting on peace and stability, which have been the thematic areas when it comes to this 38th sitting of the African Union. Peace and stabilities within their region, how they're going to be strong, how they're going to defend their borders, and how they're going to make trading accessible for their citizens. These are issues that will be highlighted on that discussion, and also there will be appointing the new chairperson that will run the affairs of the African Union, and the co-chairperson too as well that will run the affairs of the Union. So this heads of state sitting will run up to the 16th of February. So it begins tomorrow and it pushes further to the 16th of February, where the heads of state sitting will commence. So beginning tomorrow, the heads of state will gather in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where they'll be having series of meetings, series of discussion, and coming to conclusion. Draft of these of documents. They will be reviewing draft documents and having discussion and coming to a conclusion on how they will run the affair of the African Union. So the African Union is about to take a new trajectory as they welcome other new heads of states, that will be joining this 38th sitting of the African Union beginning tomorrow. So they will be welcoming those new heads of state into their summit tomorrow, and after then they will proceed with the further discussion and also carry on the appointment of the chairperson that will run the affairs of the African Union. I'm Jorazi Asa Prince Joe, and I'm here to bring you out of the major happenings here as the president departs the country today. So right after a busy week for the president, after celebrating the Armed Forces Day of Liberia, he's now departing to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where he will be representing the country, where he will be discussing bilateral issues, where they will be coming to final conclusion on issues that affects African states. So, as the president departs for Ethiopia, we already understand that the Minister of State will take charge until the president returns into the country. So, as it stands, the president will be leaving today with his delegates and other representatives that are in Addis Ababa currently that are representing Liberia. He will be joining them as he push the case of Liberia on the floor of in the presence of all African countries, all African leaders. Imagine. And again, there are a series of issues that will be highlighted. The thematic focus point will be on how they can advance themselves in trail. We understand that the intercontinental trail is also highlighted on their discussion panel. So they will be discussing these issues and how they can make trail and traveling accessible for their citizens. So that's the sole purpose of the African Union. Also, they will be discussing peace and stability as it relates to all regions that are formed part of the African Union. So President Boakai will be representing Liberia in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And again, I'm Jorazi Asa Prince Joe, and I'm here to bring you all of the major happening as the president departs the country today for Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, after a long week of work, after celebrating the Armed Forces Day celebration, and now he's departing the country to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. And as it stands, this is the president's first visit at the African Union, attending the first summit. So we hope to get out of the best and wishing out of the best as he represents Liberia, as he push the case, as they go through that discussion, head sisters, African leaders from all around the world that are forming part of the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So the President Joseph Boakai will form part of those delegates, those heads of states, as they push the case of Africa, as they push the case of how they can make Africa the best continent, on how they can help to ease the traveling between African states, and how they can make trading very accessible and affordable in African regions, on how they can improve infrastructures, and how they can make sure that peace and stability reign in their African country. So these are issues that are highlighted on their plate, that they will be discussing continental issues and how they can be able to maintain the peace and stability within all African states. So as the president leaves today for Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, as the president leaves today to represent Liberia in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, we're wishing out of the best as he goes to push the case. Remember, the president is also arguing the bid for Liberia to be part of the Security Council. So that bid have been put forward, and I guess as the president departs to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, he will also be pushing this case and see how best he can convince those African countries to form part in supporting them as the country being represented on the UN Security Council. So these are issues that the president will be highlighting on as he take the stage in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So the president will be departing with his foreign minister. He will also be departing with other ministers. So now here comes the president. So that's the president there. So folks, as you can see, the president is now departing the country to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where he will be representing Liberia at the African Union in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa.
Anthony, so get on the car to go. Yeah, please. Get on this one now. Yeah, you can show the flight.
So we are trying to make our way closer. Make our way closer to the flight as the president departs the country today to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where he will be representing the country on the African Union table as they discuss issues surrounding the country. So that's it. There, the president has already reached out to his boarding flight, and then the president has already.
Hey, baby.
So again, we can go further to the flight due to safety rule. We don't have a flight, but yet and still we can stay here and broadcast. Again, I'm Gerasi Israel Prince Joe, and I'm here and as the president departs the country today to Ethiopia, and he's boarding the Ethiopia airline. That's the Ethiopia airline. He's boarding the Ethiopia Airlines, which will be heading to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at the AU headquarters there in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So the president will be attending the 38th sitting there in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. That's the Supreme Council. The Supreme Council will open tomorrow, where several heads of states will gather as they discuss issues as it relates to African countries, as it relates to the Union, as it relates to the entire continent. So they will be discussing peace and stabilities in other countries and how they can mitigate conflict, how they can mitigate issues that surrounds African countries, especially when it comes to trade, in other countries, how people, excessively, carry on that trading process and how they move from one country to another. They're going to be discussing these issues and how they can minimize the transportations when it comes to trade, people moving from one country to another. They will also be highlighting issues on how they can maintain the peace and stability in other countries, in African regions, unity, coming together as one African to be able to fight some of these conflicts within their region. They will also be discussing how they can be able to improve the livelihood of Africans in this African region. They will also be highlighting issues on infrastructure development in the African regions. They will also be highlighting on how they can improve their various countries, and how they can be able to invest in their country. So that's it, and these are things that they will be highlighting on their plate. These are things that they will be discussing. They have been already been proposed to the Supreme, that's the heads of states. They have been going through this draft, and they will only go there and then be able to give some recommendations, give clarity, and come back to a final conclusion until they can come back to their various countries. So the heads of state summit begins tomorrow and ends on the 16th of February. So on the 16th, the climax, and then the president will be coming back in country. So I'm here. I'm Gerasi Israel Prince Joe. I'm here at the Ababa International Airport to bring you the African, to bring you the president trip. So we are trying to make our way. Go down. Okay. So we are trying to make our way to the flight as we bring you. we are trying to make our way to the flight as we bring you the president departure.
So we've been given the green light now to go towards where the aircraft is. And here we are.
Okay.
This is LNTV, Liberia Live. We're coming to you from the Ababa International Airport, where His Excellency Boakai will shortly depart Liberia to attend the 38th Ordinary Session Assembly of the African Union in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And we have Ethiopian Airlines.
All right, so here we are at the airline. So the president, His Excellency Joseph Boakai, will be leaving the country and he'll be boarding the Ethiopia airline to Ethiopia. So the president departs the country today to attend the 38th section of the African Union. So we have finally reached the flight. That's the boarding flight. That's the boarding flight that the president will be boarding in and then leaving the country today. That's his flight. And we are here again. And that's the flight there. And the president leaves today. So within the twinkling of an eye, within a minute or two, the plane will be leaving and then headed to Ethiopia, where the president, His Excellency Joseph Boakai, will be representing the country there in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So I'm here, I'm Jurassic Joe. I'm here to bring you what is happening here. So again, the president departs the country today after a long day, a long week of work. Remember, February 11 was celebrated as the country's 68th Armed Forces Day celebration, where the president for Sierra Leone was the keynote speaker. And then right after that, the president departs the country to Ethiopia to represent his country, meeting other heads of states that are already present in Ethiopia to discuss issues affecting regions, issues affecting their various countries, and see how they can help and join hands to mitigate some of these challenges that they face with in their various countries. And also, they will be discussing some bilateral issues. They will be discussing on how strong Africans can be to be able to grow their own crops, to be able to accessibly, affordably, be able to introduce some agricultural produce, be able to feed themselves, and also they will be discussing issues on how they can help one another to mitigate some of these challenges that they face with in Africa and that region at large. Imagine there are several conflicts that have been taking place in the various African countries. So these are issues that will be highlighted on the table. These are issues they're going to be discussing on how they can join hands to see how best they can solve some of these issues and how they can talk to other countries to put a stop to these conflicts that are happening in the various countries. Issues apart from African issues, they are also discussing issues affecting the world at large. We understand there are several crises ongoing in the various parts of the world. Issues related to Gaza is also highlighted on the discussion table. Also issues affecting other African countries, the overthrowing of presidents. These are issues that will be highlighted on their agenda. These are issues they're going to be discussing democratically. How can they help to solve these issues? How can they help to solve some of these problems that they are faced with in the African countries? So these are issues they're going to be discussing. These are issues that have been highlighted on that discussion point. Imagine, and as we can remember, the African Union Summit started since January the 13th of January and up to this point. So there are issues that they have been discussing, plenty that have been ongoing. Draft documents, preparations of documents have been on the way. So the presidents, the heads of states are the ones that are going to conclude the summit, that are going to conclude the entire summit. So this is a supreme sitting where heads of states will be, this concluding sitting where heads of states will meet to finalize their discussion, to come to conclusion and see how best they can start to implement some of these projects. They can start to implement some of these drafts that have been already created. So they will come out the final conclusion and start implementing this issue. They will make some points, they will make some recommendations, they will be able to highlight some issues, they will revisit the constitutions, they will be able to revisit some of those projects that they were undertaking. They will revisit all of those documents, that have been updated. They will be revisiting some of those issues, that they face, and highlighting their challenges as an African Union, highlighting their disadvantages, these things that they face during that term, and also turning over to the next appointed chairperson that will take over the African Union. So these are issues that they will be highlighting. It's going to be a basic summit, the African Union summit, and this African Union summit will be taking place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and that's where the headquarters of the AU is located. So there where all African countries represented are already there. Executive members are already there. The executive member comprises of ministers. The executive member comprises of ambassadors that are already in country, already carrying on some discussions, and also the Supreme Council. The Supreme Council is where it's headed by heads of states. So social heads of states are part of the Supreme Council. So the Supreme Council will be meeting tomorrow up to the 16th. So the Supreme Council are all heads of states forming part of the Supreme Council from all African countries. They are all parts of the Supreme Council. They will be meeting tomorrow and see how best they can finalize what have been further discussed by the executive members. What have been further discussed by the executive council, all of those draft documents will be discussed and looked into and worked on, and after that they come out to final conclusion, and right after the final conclusion, these heads of states will be headed back into that country and begins to work on the plans, on what they have discussed, on all the issues that have been highlighted and conclude on. They will come back in that country and begin the implementations of the issues. The AU will also be electing or appointing, because they carry on appointment, not election. They will be appointing their new chairperson and the co-chairperson that will take over the entire operations of the AU onto that next summit. So after every summit, there will be a new chairperson that will be appointed to take over the summit and take over all what have been concluded, all of the projects and all of those bilateral issues that they have concluded on. They will take over and begin to work and implement all of their projects. So as the president departs for Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, to meet several heads of state, as the president departs Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to meet other heads of state to discuss issues as it relates to African Union. Remember, Liberia formed part of the first existing African countries that established the AU. So Liberia being part of this summit is interesting. So this is today's summit. I'm Jurassic, is a Prince Joe reporting in Baba.